Okay. So welcome to today's webinar for BMES. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Dorma Flemister. I'm a PhD student at The Ohio State University. And I'd like to introduce my guest, Danielle McGreary, Vice President of Healthcare Technology Management at AAMI. So I would like her to go ahead and just give a brief introduction about herself.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining, and thank you to the Biomedical Engineering Society for having me today. So my name is Danielle McGeary, and I work for an association called AAMI, which stands for the Association for the Advancement of Medical Instrumentation. I have a bachelor's and master's in biomedical engineering from the University of Connecticut, and my whole career has been in the healthcare technology management field, which is probably a field that many of you have never heard of, but it's a great avenue for biomedical engineers to go into if you like to be customer facing, working in hospitals, and being on the front line, working with all different types of cutting edge technologies every day. So I started my career working at Hartford Hospital as a clinical engineer, where I did a lot of project management of medical equipment. So when hospitals put up new exam rooms, towers, patient wings, we're working with the clinicians, the architects, the designers to plan all the medical equipment that goes into those areas. And I did that for about 7 years. And then I went over to the VA healthcare system, which is the hospital system that serves all of the veterans in our country. And I ran their healthcare technology management department for the five hospitals that are up here. So I managed about 40 people across the whole enterprise, and made sure that all the medical equipment in those hospitals was safe for patients when they needed it most. And then I went over to a large company called Aramark, where I ran HTM departments all across the Northeast as a district manager. And now I'm here at AAMI, and part of my role is to spread awareness about this field because many people don't know it exists. Most people walk into a hospital and take everything for granted. They don't think about all of the medical instrumentation, where it came from, who picked it out, how did it get there, how is there miraculously an electrical outlet right next to the medical device so the cord's not stretching over the patient, for instance. So it's a really neat field. I've loved working in it for the past 10 years. It's rewarding. You help people every day, and every day is different. So I'm excited to be here and talk about the field and share my career journey with all of you.
Okay. So thank you for coming in today and giving us your experience and any sort of advice. And I'd also thank our participants for joining. I want to let them know that they can start writing in questions, and we will sprinkle them in as they come up into the conversation. But first, I want to start with asking Danielle, as many students right now are looking for jobs, how did you find your first job? Can you describe the process?
Absolutely. So when I was graduating with my bachelor's degree in biomedical engineering, I really didn't know what I wanted to do with my biomedical engineering degree. I'm an extreme extrovert. The thought of going into research and development and sitting at a desk every day just wasn't for me. So when I was getting ready to graduate, I was a member of the Biomedical Engineering Society, and the Biomedical Engineering Society at UConn actually gave a presentation about clinical engineering, which is a subset of biomedical engineering. And I was fortunate that UConn had a graduate program in biomedical engineering that focused in clinical engineering. So I applied to that, and I ended up getting a graduate assistantship at Hartford Hospital. And we had to work there 20 hours a week as a clinical engineer. So I got to do everything from, picking out new equipment with clinicians, doing all the equipment planning that I mentioned earlier, and everything from fixing all the equipment when it goes down. You know, the real reality of it is that, you know, not everything works every time you need it, right? So, you know, sometimes an anesthesia machine may stop in the middle of a surgery, and there's very specially trained people like us that rush in there, fix it, swap it out quickly, and do all that work behind the scenes. I also had the opportunity to work really closely with IT. So most medical devices now connect to, you know, the electronic health record. You know, gone are the days when you walk around with your paper records anymore. Everything's stored in an electronic health record. So we help make sure all the medical devices connect seamlessly and all that data flows between systems. So while I was there doing my graduate assistantship, I really just, you know, volunteered for everything, did as much as I could, and really got an eclectic experience. The clinical engineer who was there, that had been there for like 40 years, just suddenly one day said, I'm retiring and I'm not coming back tomorrow. So midway through my master's degree, they asked me, you know, will you take this job? But we can't hold it for you, you know, for a year until you graduate. So your options are, you know, pass it up or continue your graduate program and work full time. So I did work it out with my manager to say, obviously getting my master's degree was really important, and I didn't want to take this job and not, you know, finish my degree that I had started. So they were very great, and they accepted that. So they allowed me to go to class, and I did my 40 hours, sometimes off hours. But that's really how I got my first job. I was kind of at the right place at the right time, but also did a good job, and was dedicated to my internship. And I guess they wanted me to stay. So that's how I got my first job. So, I mean, I would just, for all of you out there, if I know it's really tough with the COVID situation, I know a lot of interns and volunteers have been sent home, but for those of you who are able to get an internship, I would say show up every day, you know, with a great attitude, work as hard as you can, and learn as much as you can, because when you're interning and when you're volunteering or doing graduate assistantships, depending upon what level of your education you're at right now, now's the time to learn. When you go to work 40 hours a week, you won't have the opportunity to see as many different things that you would, you know, like shadowing someone in a different department. Like my job has always been in the hospital, so I was able to follow clinicians around and see all of the medical equipment in use, because understanding the clinical workflow around a medical device is really important to our roles as clinical engineers in the HTM field. If you don't understand how the medical device works and how it's used, you can't really help, you know, implement new technologies to make the workflow in a hospital even safer and more efficient. So definitely learn as much as you can now, because that knowledge will help you later.
That's a fantastic response there. So something I wanted to ask was, what is healthcare technology management, and how does that apply to biomedical engineers overall? So what is that field all about?
Absolutely. So the healthcare technology management field is the management, assessment, and, well, healthcare technology, let me back up. Healthcare technology management is the occupation of all the people who help support, maintain, and assess medical instrumentation in hospitals on the front line every day. So every hospital has an HTM department. Now, hospitals may call the HTM department different things, whether it's biomed, biomedical engineering, clinical engineering, or healthcare technology management. But there are people working behind the scenes in every hospital to ensure equipment is safe for when patients need it most. So it's really an amazing career path. If you have an interest in working in a hospital every day on the front lines, it is so neat, because you get to really see clinicians use the equipment, understand their workflow like I was talking about, and then bring in technologies to really help them do their jobs better. So we get involved in everything from the routine maintenance. So most medical devices need to be checked at least once a year. And basically there's two occupations within the healthcare technology field, and that's biomedical equipment technicians. So the technicians help maintain the equipment. They do all the maintenance on the equipment when it breaks. They do planned and preventative maintenance. You know, some equipment needs parts changed out, like O-rings, things that wear down over time. And it's also important just to, you know, double check that the infusion pump is really outputting what you set it to. You know, over time, you know, the equipment could be dropped, broken, things could have spilled on it. And, you know, so the technicians do a lot of that work. The clinical engineers, which have a degree, which are engineers in the hospital that have a degree in biomedical engineering or mechanical engineering, and they do a lot of the project management. They do the equipment assessment. So when a hospital wants to replace a fleet of infusion pumps, the clinical engineer is at the table working with the clinicians, hospital administration, you know, infection control, all those support services, because it's really a multidisciplinary approach. And they work through and plan that install. Well, first they help pick it out. So sometimes the clinical engineers will help set up a demo day, for instance. You know, there's many different types of infusion pumps on the market. So you'll call in all the vendors, set them up in a room, the doctors, nurses, all the clinicians will go through, and then they'll help make a selection. Then once you get that, once you decide, you help with the ordering process, you know, and then when it arrives, the HTM department has to check every one of those infusion pumps to make sure that it works. The clinical engineer is the project manager that oversees all of that, all of those pieces to make sure it gets from the company that you ordered it to the hospital, and then you help roll it out. So then once, you know, they've all been checked, they all need to go out in different care units, right? So, and there's also an education piece. You help set up the education because the infusion pump may not work the same as the old device that they were using. So there's a learning curve there. So you help stage all those go lives. You would never just roll out all the infusion pumps into the whole hospital at once, right? So you may do it unit by unit. And then the other piece is now most infusion pumps are very smart. They all have drug libraries. So you have to work with IT and the pharmacy to make sure that that software program behind the scenes is programmed properly with all the right drug dosages. So that's how you stop people from getting misinfusions. Back in the day, you might want to put 0.01 of a drug, but if someone just incidentally put 0.1 instead of 0.01, that's a huge error, and someone could be misinfused with a drug that could be really detrimental to their life. So the fact that we have drug libraries, you turn on the pump, and now you have to select the set dosage that's safe. You just don't manually enter it anymore. So we work with pharmacy to make sure that's all done, and then IT to make sure it's entered. You have to set up the server behind the scenes in the server room. And then when you go live as the project manager, you're there on the floors with all the doctors and nurses helping to troubleshoot, and pharmacists to help troubleshoot any problems that may arise. So it's really neat. There's a huge process in the hospital for things like that people never really think about. And clinical engineers also get involved in medical device investigation. So if a medical device does malfunction, you work with the safety department to do root cause analysis to see, well, was it the medical device that failed? Was it a clinical error? What happened? And then you can really, through your engineering mindset, you can really give real-time feedback to the hospital and solve problems to make hospitals safer. So we're constantly out looking how we can use this technology and along with the clinician's workflow to really optimize healthcare. So it's such a great field. I've loved working in it. Thank you for asking that question.
Well, it's good to have you here and answering these questions. And I'm sure this is something new to many students to start to consider going down the line. So if we were to ask, what's kind of like a big pitfall for someone just entering the field?
So for healthcare technology management field, while everyone is losing their jobs and getting laid off, we need more people. Obviously HTM professionals played a huge role in the COVID pandemic. because of all the ventilators that were needed. So HTM professionals were helped trying to source these ventilators, working on emergency management teams with the hospitals. When the ventilators arrive, they have to test them. If the ventilator that arrived is different than the normal, style of ventilators that they have, it may need different accessories and different parts. So HTM professionals are really coordinating that behind the scenes with the emergency management teams at the hospital. Up here in Boston, there's been a lot of work at Mass General to figure out how to monitor a ventilator patient. So they found some creative ways to put screens outside the patient room so the clinician doesn't have to enter the room to change the ventilator settings. So they set up a camera so you can see the patient, and then there's a slave monitor outside or a mirror monitor outside the room that mirrors what's on the ventilator screen. And from there, respiratory therapists can change the ventilator settings based upon how the patient's doing. And what that does is it minimizes clinician exposure to a COVID-positive patient, so it's an infection control measure, and it also minimizes PPE usage on personal protective equipment, so all the masks and gowns and whatnot. So there's really really HTM professionals have been at the forefront of this pandemic trying to really use technology to solve these problems. And for hospitals that had to turn care units over to COVID units suddenly, now, not every room originally is set up for a ventilator. Ventilators do not have a typical three-pronged plug like your computer monitor may have. Ventilators are plugged in via a twist lock. So you plug it into the wall and twist. And that's a safety mechanism for a ventilator. So if you're walking around the room and you catch your foot on the ventilator, the cord doesn't pull out of the wall, right? And because if that ventilator stops, the patient dies. So when you're forced to try to set up units that need ventilators in rooms that don't have that infrastructure, you have to work and coordinate and get that all there, and also making sure that there's oxygen flows and medical air flows into the rooms as well. So HTM professionals have done a lot of work with that as well. So in regards to Pitfalls, I mean, this is a career where we'll have job stability. You won't get laid off. There's always medical technology going on in the hospital. Technology is always changing, so you're always learning something new. Every day there's something different fails or some new technology comes in, so every day is different. And our workforce in the HTM field, the majority of people are over the age of 50. So in the next 10 to 15 years, there's going to be a mass exodus of retirees. And that opens up a big opportunity for growth for our new HTM professionals entering the workforce for long-term growth.
Okay, so let's kind of switch gears and talk about how to get into the field as a whole, or from a biomedical engineer standpoint, what should students start thinking about when it comes to networking? So how do you network without bothering people? These are for more the younger, less experienced students. How do you network with professionals without bothering? How do you reach out to them?
Sure, that's a great question. My first suggestion would be, if you do not have a LinkedIn profile, you should go make one, and make sure that your profile picture is a professional one, not like a bathroom selfie or anything like that. Because remember, employees and headhunters are always looking through profiles to find new talent for whatever, type of job you want to pursue. So I think it's very important to have a LinkedIn profile and actually log on and use it. There's a lot of great jobs posted there as well. I would also say, well, for those of you who are on the call today, I think you're taking the first great step at networking, because involvement outside of your day-to-day in professional societies is a huge way to network. So whatever your interest may be, and whatever facet of biomedical engineering interests you, you should definitely find a local, society, a local chapter, whether it's at your college or in your region, to be involved with, because the more people you meet and the more people you network with, like, that's your long-term stability for career employment. A lot of times jobs come from who you know, and because when, especially now with 32 million people that have been laid off, so many people are going to be all vying for the same job. So what sets you apart? And a lot of that, a lot of people have fancy degrees, but it's how you use them, what you do with them, your involvement, your attitude, and how you present yourself, and like I said, learn as much as you can. Learn lateral skills. So, like another skill would maybe be project management. You could, get your PMP, for instance, or, you could pursue your professional, your PE, your professional engineering licensure. But it's and so the way I got my first internship when I was a sophomore in college was, I wasn't having good luck just sending my resume out, in these random forums or HR sites. So I actually just Googled, biomedical engineering companies near me because I knew I was going to spend the summer at home. And I ended up emailing this one company in Massachusetts, and I just randomly emailed like the marketing or customer service person and said, hey, I'm a biomedical engineering summer student. I don't have an internship, and I was wondering if you're looking at hiring an intern this summer. And they wrote back and said, actually, we weren't, but, the fact that you reached out, we could definitely look to see if we could make use of you this summer, because we always need extra help. So I think sometimes taking that step forward and doing something a little different can really help you. But I think the way you do it, you have to be very careful. So for instance, a lot of people will just reach out to me on LinkedIn and just say, hi, I need a job, here's my resume. I just automatically hit delete because I'm not a headhunter. I don't place people. That's not my job. I'm willing to help people who want to be helped, but showing a genuine interest, having a connection. So just be careful that you're not standoffish when you reach out to people. Take the time to type them a nice note, explain yourself, come off, kind, but not overly cocky. And, obviously check all your spelling in your email. Make sure there's no typos, because, that's their first impression of you. And you don't want to come off like, that you don't have good grammar or English or anything like that. So definitely, reach out, get involved. I know it's hard now with COVID. A lot of places aren't meeting face-to-face anymore, but there's still a lot of great virtual forums out there, such as this. But that would be my suggestion.
Okay, so with that in mind, what kind of non-technical skills do you utilize on a day-to-day basis that you would have wished you learned as a student that would have helped you in your career? Well, that has helped you in your career that you would have wished you would have learned as a student.
Absolutely. So I would obviously say project management, being able to lay out what needs to be done, understand what needs to be done, keep it all in order, is really important. Like even just with meeting deadlines, thinking through things, financially as well. I mean, many organizations, even hospitals, are businesses, and they're very financially driven. And understanding that finance side, how you contribute to their bottom line, is really important, because at the end of the day, we're all employees of an organization, and we have overhead, and what value do you bring to the organization? So understanding the project management piece along with the financial impact. So for instance, when we swap out medical equipment and whatnot, we have to show, well, if we reduce, we'll use the infusion pump example. If we decrease infusion errors, this could save the hospital X amount of dollars a year. And also thinking about, you know, the marketing of it, right? If a hospital has a major infusion error and that hits primetime news, people aren't going to want to go back to that hospital. So you don't want to have bad publicity. Same thing even if you guys are in research and development and working for a big medical device company. If there's a major recall with your devices that you're manufacturing because they're failing on patients and you find out it's a design issue, that company takes a major financial hit. So you really got to think about all the inner workings, the financial aspect, being able to deliver on time, so the project management piece, and also the public speaking aspect of it. You know, depending what your role is as a biomedical engineer, regardless if you're in industry, in the hospital, you're going to have to be able to present at project meetings. If you're in the hospital, you're going to have to be talking to doctors and nurses. Doctors and nurses aren't technical people. Nurses didn't go into nursing because they love technology. They went into nursing because they want to help people. So when they don't understand how to use a medical device, talking technical jargon is not going to help them anymore. And I've seen many engineers come into the hospitals, whether it's from the medical device manufacturers, from laboratories, or even people working in the hospital that can't translate technical jargon into everyday talk that everyone can understand. So being able to explain a technical problem in a way that everyone can understand is so, so important, no matter what facet of biomedical engineering you go into, because whether you're in research and development, you may have to talk to the marketing team, you know, and you have to learn how to omit information that's not needed. You know, it's not a matter of showing someone how much you know or how smart you are. It's being able to solve the problem through your communication. And that may not be the most technical conversation. The most technical conversation may not always be needed. And learning how to be patient with those people that are not technical. Because having a sense of empathy and understanding that not everyone thinks like you is really important and will help you get further in your career. People who get passed up for promotion are often the people who talk down to others, can't communicate soundly, and just aren't good in front of a customer. So you need to really think through that in understanding who your audience is. Like if you're talking to a bunch of biomedical engineers that are interested, you know, talk technical all you want, but you need to understand how to translate and who your audience are so you're speaking the right the right words to the right audience.
Okay, that sounds like sound advice. So is there anything you would have wished you had done differently in academia while you were still in grad school?
That's a tough question because I look back at my career and I'm just so happy with the career path I ended up in. It was a complete accident. I never started out as a biomedical engineering major saying I wanted to work in healthcare technology management. I didn't even know it was an option until my junior year in college. So, so I think I was kind of at the right place at the right time. But I think the one thing that I would have done differently was probably improve my writing over time, because I don't feel that I am the most eloquent writer. And in our positions now, you have to do a lot of emailing back and forth and whatnot. And, I guess I just feel like that's always something that I could have improved upon. Not that I'm awful at it, but I definitely think that I could have done better. So I think if I would have focused a little more in other non-technical areas, that probably would have helped me to be a little bit more well-rounded. But again, as you get into your career, you're going to learn this stuff and you'll find what you need to improve on. So I wouldn't really be worried about those things. But the one thing that I would suggest to everyone is make sure you have a mentor, no matter how, and this probably goes back to the other question as well, but no matter what age you are, everyone should have a mentor. It doesn't matter if you've worked in a field for 40 years or 0. Having someone to talk to and get advice to and constructive criticism from is really important, and it makes you better. And it's important to get feedback from someone that isn't your direct manager, because sometimes you want to have a confidential conversation or something happens that, maybe you don't want to talk to your boss about, or maybe it's a conflict of interest to talk to your boss. So just having someone there to say, this is what, this is how I would work through this situation. Because as you move up in an organization, if you're managing people, your challenges change. The first time you have to write someone up may be very intimidating. The first time you have to let someone go may be difficult. And sometimes the things that we need mentoring about may not be, biomedical engineering skills. A lot of times the challenges are the other stuff as you work through a career, or even dealing with someone in the office that's maybe hard to talk to, or, and just, so, I think having a mentor sooner would have helped more. But now that I do that, I think it's really been beneficial. So I would definitely recommend that to everyone.
Okay. So with that kind of in mind, you just kind of touched on a mentorship as being something that would really help benefit you in your career. What are some other ways that you would think undergraduates or even grad students, like postdocs, PhD, NS students looking towards industry, what do you think how should they prepare themselves and like setting up a good resume, and what do you think they should include in terms of their experience?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So I think that goes back to the LinkedIn thing as well, because LinkedIn is just your resume basically electronically, but it is really important to have a good, strong resume, again, with no typos, that really covers you comprehensively and shows how well-rounded you are. Now, I've definitely had people interview for jobs with me in the hospital, and I always ask people, because in the HTM field, you definitely need to be okay working in a hospital. You may see blood, you may see, you may have to go in the OR, see someone cut open, and not everyone's okay with that, and that's okay. It's just not the career for you, right? If you can't stomach that. So I often ask people, have you worked in a hospital before? What is your experience? And a lot of people start off by saying, well, I haven't. And then as I start digging deeper, they'll come out and say, well, I volunteered one summer and did X, Y, and Z, and they always say the same thing. Well, I wasn't paid for it. I didn't get paid for this work, so I didn't put it on my resume. If you have relevant experience, regardless if you were paid for it or not, you need to put it on your resume, because experience is experience regardless of what you were paid or not. I don't care if you volunteered for 20 years and then are coming to me for a full-time position. It's experience, and it's important to know that. So just make sure that you don't sell yourself short in an interview, and make sure you tailor your resume for the job you're interviewing for. If you're interviewing for a job in industry, you should tailor your resume to industry type experiences. But if you're interviewing for a job in a hospital, you definitely want to highlight any hospital experience you may have. And the other thing that I do want to just point out as well is that something may seem unrelated when it is. So my brother-in-law was applying for a job as an architect, and he had me look over his resume. And he had been a referee for all different levels of soccer for over 10 years. And I said, well, why is that not on your resume? And he goes, that's not even relevant to getting a position, an architecture position at all. And I said, well, actually it is, because it shows that you can deal with conflict management in managing a group of people. Refereeing a job when you have upset parents or kids that are being unruly on the field because they don't like your call, you have to have great conflict management and resolution skills. And that's important in an office environment, or if you're going out and working with customers, if you want to eventually be a manager. So make sure you think through everything that you've done, because that you're not skipping something or selling yourself short, because you may think architecture and refereeing, nothing related. But if you really think through what you do on the field and how that translates into other jobs, it is applicable in some cases. So don't sell yourself short, and take the time to write up a good resume, have people review it, and think through everything you've done that could potentially be relevant, not just the obvious things that are relevant.
Okay, that sounds like sound advice. So currently in our situation with COVID, there have been many students who were going to receive internships or summer research opportunities, and now they've been canceled. So how do you explain on your resume this kind of a gap in internships, research opportunities to people in the future?
So I can only speak for myself and how I would handle that. I don't know how another hiring manager would, but obviously we know that there is a nationwide or worldwide pandemic going on right now. And I think that comes down to the empathy of the hiring manager to understand that some of that was outside of your control. Now, I think, it's important to obviously explain that and look for opportunities where you still can get experience. But, like I said, there's definitely a lot of online things you can do to do continual learning, being part of this. So even though, I would definitely say, even though your internship got canceled, you were still active in the Biomedical Engineering Society, did continuing learning online, attended webinars, and you tried your best. I wouldn't just sit home on the couch and say, poor me. I would definitely still try to learn as much as you can in other methods, because I think the thing with engineers and all of us, we have to constantly adapt and overcome, whether that's a technical issue, whether that's designing something new, and that's what we do all day long. And today, with this nationwide pandemic, we still just have to, or worldwide pandemic, we have to adapt and overcome again. So we have to find creative solutions to still, learn and, just do the best you can. But I wouldn't also worry that the fact that your internship got canceled because of something outside of your control, that you'll never get hired. So I would definitely keep a positive attitude through it all as well, and not just sit there and, and be upset about it, because it is outside of your control. And I'm sure it's very disappointing for those of you who, had that happen. But, it's happening everywhere, which is definitely unfortunate.
Yeah, so that is reasonable advice to give people. So do you have any suggestions for certifications or trainings that you recommend a biomedical engineer get before entering the job market, or give them an advantage in the job market?
Well, a lot of certifications out there do require some work experience. I think there are some, like the project management, PMI, the Project Management Institute, they do offer like an apprentice type project management certification, I guess you could get if you don't have work experience yet. For those of you that have work experience, I would recommend the PMP. And depending like what you do with your biomedical engineering degree, if you're doing manufacturing or R&D, I mean, the big thing with medical devices now is cybersecurity, and there's a lot of different IT and type certifications out there, like the CompTIA and things like that out there, that depending what your interest is definitely worth pursuing. And I definitely, in the one thing, and I know even through AAMI where I work, we offer certifications for HTM professionals. And obviously, certifications aren't required, right? But it shows that you took that extra step in your career because you care about continuing learning, and it just validates that you meet a minimum competency for what you do. And a lot of jobs are starting to require or prefer that when they're looking at people to hire. So I would definitely, if you can get a certification that's relevant to your job, to, try to obtain that. And a lot of employers will pay for it as well. So definitely look into that.
Do you still utilize networking even at your current position to make bridges between clients, companies, and whatnot?
Absolutely. I network every day, and that's what I'm doing right now, right? So, AAMI, we really want to promote the healthcare technology management field. So I reached out to Ryan, who organized this webinar. I didn't know her. I just typed her an email, explained, hey, we have this great field out here that's a subset of biomedical engineering that a lot of biomedical engineers don't even know exists. Is there a way that we could work together as the two associations and help promote this? And, we'll help the BMES in some other way in return. So yes, I network every day. And for what we do, a lot of it is we reach out to schools to ask if we can, well, not now because of COVID, but, before we'd reach out to schools, I randomly emailed the Girl Scouts and said, hey, can we come present to your Girl Scouts up here in New England about healthcare technology management? And I also, I'm involved. I'm from Boston. I don't know if I said that earlier, but up here in New England, we have a local New England Society of Clinical Engineers, and I was the president of it for quite a few years, and I'm still very involved in it today. I love seeing all my colleagues from all the different hospitals across New England, and I keep in touch with all my old bosses and colleagues. It's really important, to see how they're doing, talk about the field, talk about challenges. Sometimes, in the hospital, we may have a medical device problem that you just can't figure out. If you have a network of other people, maybe they saw that same problem at another hospital, or especially with the COVID situation when there was a ventilator shortage, there was a concern that there might be a ventilator shortage, knowing who your colleagues are at the other hospitals help you to say, hey, can I borrow this? And we do that all the time. So it's really important to make sure that you have a network of people and keep in touch with them, and not only when you need them, because that seems ingenuine. It's important that it's a two-way street, that when you need help, you ask for help, but when they need help, you help them too. So definitely just remember that.
So could you briefly explain, within the healthcare technology management field, what the prospects are for someone with an undergraduate degree versus having a master's versus a PhD versus having a postdoc? What are the different levels that you reach?
There are people with PhDs working in the field, but that's not required. To get a job as a clinical engineer at a hospital, you would need a bachelor's in engineering. We're fortunate in New England because we have the graduate program in clinical engineering. So many of us have gone through it because it is a graduate program that's focused in the field. And there's also, if you like the more technical side, like solving problems, medical device vendors also hire biomedical equipment technicians, and a lot of those roles do require an engineering degree. So those are the people coming on site, if you don't have the expertise in the hospital to fix the MRI machine, GE Healthcare or Philips Healthcare or Siemens, they have a field service engineer that will come on site and work with the on-site HTM team in the hospital. So you actually, while I did talk about there's a lot in the hospital, you can actually work for the big medical equipment manufacturers and still be in and out of the hospitals as well, doing that. But to move up, if you want to eventually run your own HTM department and have oversight for it all, you do need to have a master's degree. And the reason for that is the executive, the C-suite, which is the the executive team, the CEO, chief operating officer, chief nursing officer, chief medical officer, they're all very highly educated people with multiple degrees, multiple certifications, a lot of letters after their name. And when you move up to that level where you're running your own department, you're constantly working with them directly. And, in order to keep moving up, education-wise, you need to be on the same level as them. But for an entry-level clinical engineer role, a bachelor's in engineering is fine, and a master's will help you as, maybe get a higher salary or whatnot.
Okay. Let's see. So what's gender equality like within the field? Is this a problem you've run into within this field?
I really think that's a tough question because I personally, as an individual, have never felt discriminated against, but I know that's not the case for everyone. I guess the only discrimination, and I use that very lightly, that I may have ever received is sometimes when I run up to a floor to fix a problem, people are like, oh, are you the nurse? Because I'm a female. They don't assume that I'm the engineer. They assume I'm the nurse. But no one's ever been derogatory towards me in the sense that, they haven't taken my opinion. They don't think that I can do my job properly because I'm a female. So I've never experienced that. And the minute I tell people, no, I'm not the nurse, I'm the engineer here to work on your equipment, everyone's like, oh, I'm so sorry, But I think over time, there's more and more women going into this field. There's a lot of female clinical engineers, at least up here in New England, and you're seeing more and more of that. A lot of the technician type roles are still very male dominated, and we're trying to change that over time, and we're starting to see more and more female technicians enter the field. But the clinical engineering role, I would say, is pretty split, and there may even be more female clinical engineers than males. I know a couple years ago at UConn, the graduate program in clinical engineering was 100% women, so which is pretty amazing when you think about it.
Okay. So I guess this is a final question I want to ask, and is there any room for entrepreneurship within this field, or how do you feel about that for someone who wants to start their own company for medical technology management?
So that's tough because if you want to start your own medical devices, that's more development. So I wouldn't say that you're working in the HTM field because you would, HTM professionals don't do any development. We take what's there and utilize the technology. So no one in the HTM department is coming up with a new medical device. What we may do is if you need a quick solution, like I was talking about earlier, with the monitors outside the room, we may take different types of technology and put it together. We may order a monitor, a hub, a switch, some Ethernet cables, and figure out how to make it all work. But we typically work directly with the vendors, and they come in and we bring their solutions together. But in regards to entrepreneurship, a lot of the long-term clinical engineers do go off and start their own consulting companies. So that is a great opportunity. So because there's a lot more than probably what I explained, but medical devices have to be maintained per manufacturer specifications, per the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid. If you don't follow their requirements, your hospital could lose accreditation. And that's really important because if you lose CMS accreditation, they don't get their Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement, which could be really detrimental to their revenue streams because, again, hospitals are businesses. So a lot of times people have trouble, figuring out how to run their medical equipment management program. There's all different things such as, if you do a failure modes and effects analysis, you may be able to look at and say, well, we've PM'd or done preventative maintenance on 100 infusion pumps every year, and over the past 5 years, we haven't found one problem. So maybe we want to take that off of the maintenance schedule. But you have to, there's a whole process, an approval process through the regulatory bodies and everything that you need to follow in order to do that. And sometimes people have trouble doing that. So, they'll bring in an outside consultant, or maybe, your healthcare technology management program just isn't really built up yet. The smaller hospitals maybe just have a technician and not, just one or two technicians, and they're literally just a break-fix shop. They're not doing comprehensive services like project planning, equipment assessment, equipment acquisition, and other things that a full, well-rounded HTM department should be doing. So these consultants will come in and really walk you through how to set up a strong HTM department. So, after you gain some experience and really understand the field really well, you could become, start your own company doing things like that.
Okay, well, that is a great answer for anybody that's thinking of having, or anybody that has an entrepreneurial spirit. So I'd like to kind of, since there are no more questions to be asked, I'd like to thank Danielle for her time to give us, for giving us advice, answering these questions. And is there anything you would like to say as some last remarks?
Sure. I think my contact information is below, but if there's anything I can do to help anyone, if you want to learn more about the HTM field, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. We have lots of materials. And if you go to www.imhtm.org, there's a lot of great information about the field. And our hashtag is hashtag IMHTM, so definitely look that up. There's a lot of great posts of people working in the field and what they do and why they love the profession. So, and again, I just also want to say that I hope everyone, all of you and your families are safe, and for anyone that may have been negatively impacted by this pandemic, that, on behalf of myself and everyone at AAMI, we extend our sincere condolences. And if there's anything that we can do to help you, please let us know. And thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, so thank you guys for coming out to this webinar. We will have our next webinar in June, so look out for the coming news blast. And we really appreciate everybody coming out here. I appreciate Danielle and BMES for setting this up. So with that, I'd like to say goodbye.